The world is dim now. Not dark exactly, just resting. Outside your window, a faint amber glow smudges the edges of silhouetted trees, and somewhere far off, someone is microwaving leftovers with heroic optimism. But here, it's quiet. You feel the rhythm of your breath, a soft hum, a screen's glow, and the faint crinkle of blankets as you settle in. Tonight, your journey begins not on a battlefield or ancient street, but inside your own head, or at least, inside the squishy electric shell of it. Welcome to NoctoScientist, where bedtime meets brainwaves. If you like drifting off while learning strange, delightful things you'll barely remember in the morning, you're in the right, oddly specific place. Please gently press that like button like it's a snooze alarm. And if you're still with me before your dreams start buffering, comment your location and local time, because there's something poetically weird about knowing someone in Reykjavik and someone in Kuala Lumpur are both falling asleep to neural oscillations. Oh, and fair warning, you probably won't make it through this day. That's fine. No one survives sleep science storytelling fully conscious. Now let's ease into tonight's journey. You're walking down a narrow corridor, lined with flickering blue light screens, electrodes, graphs that look like mountain ranges, drawn by a very anxious toddler. This is a sleep lab, circa 1950-something. The walls smell faintly of coffee breath and floor polish. A technician with a tie too short for his neck is whispering to a clipboard. He nods toward the cot in the corner. Volunteer 12 is dreaming now. You stare at the tangle of wires taped to the sleeper's head. It looks like they've been plugged into a jukebox designed by Frankenstein. This is the beginning of something big. The discovery of REM sleep, or rapid eye movement, named after the thing your eyeballs do under your lids when your brain decides it's movie night. Scientists in the mid-20th century had finally noticed something strange. Every 90 minutes or so during sleep, brain waves changed dramatically. The eyes moved, the limbs stayed still. People woken during this phase consistently reported dreaming, which sounds obvious to us now. But at the time, it was like finding out your cat has been writing poetry behind your back. A few decades before this, most experts thought dreams were just leftover burps of waking life, unimportant, shadowy. Freud, of course, disagreed, because if there's an opportunity to tie your dreams to childhood furniture trauma, he's already on it. Historians still debate whether Anne was discovered independently in multiple labs, or whether one team borrowed inspiration in the usual academic way, very politely and without eye contact. You move closer to the sleeper. Their face twitches, just once. A light beep accompanies a spike on the EEG machine. For a moment, you imagine what they're dreaming. Maybe they're at a picnic where all the sandwiches speak French. The technician leans over and murmurs, "This is the dreaming brain. We're starting to map it." Across the room, someone's eating peanuts too loudly. The lab was funded on a grant, small enough to make a single bean cry. And yet, here is where modern dream science truly began. Bleary-eyed, underfunded, and soaked in instant coffee. Before we move on, did you know that in some 17th century German households, people believed sleeping on your left side made you dream of witches? No proof, of course. But if you woke up cursing in Latin and facing east, people took notes. You make your way toward a filing cabinet bulging with handwritten dream logs. "Saw dog made of fire, no pants," reads one entry. Next to it, "falling into eggs," repeatedly. The earliest dream studies weren't glamorous, but they were sincere. And now, you feel your own eyelids getting heavier. The corridor blurs. Someone hands you a cup of warm silence. You sip it. Let's keep drifting. Somewhere in Vienna, under a ceiling too tall to whisper to, a couch waits. It is older now. Dust has softened its velvet into a kind of sigh. It no longer startles when someone sits too quickly. It knows what it holds. This couch has heard secrets once too tangled for language. It has heard confessions in several dialects, cried on by 4 generations of Europeans, and once, confusingly, by a nervous American poet who only came in for directions. This couch is where modern dream interpretation, as we think of it, first found its feet. And the man who sat beside it, often more curious than certain, was Sigmund Freud. Now, before we step into his study, let's leave behind the textbooks and internet oversimplifications. Forget the smirking talk shows and the jokes about your mother. Let's meet Freud as he was, an insomniac, who suspected that dreams were not nonsense, but messages in an uncracked code, the very first translator of a language no one was entirely sure existed. When Freud first published The Interpretation of Dreams in 1899, it landed like a quiet echo, not with applause but with confusion. His theory, that dreams were wish fulfillments, not because they were all happy. Some dreams were terrifying, but because even fear could be a mask, an actor in costume, concealing something the dreamer wasn't ready to name. Freud wrote, "The dream is the disguised fulfillment of a repressed wish." Imagine trying to say that at a dinner party in 1900. And yet, that idea clung, not just because of its daring, but because it resonated. Freud believed the dream was a psychic stage, a little theater behind the forehead, where thoughts too risky to say aloud could finally play dress-up. Let's step inside one of those dreams. A young man lies on the famous couch, stiff-backed, his fingers twitching along the embroidery. He tells Freud that he dreamt of soup, specifically that he was a bowl of soup being carried down the hallway of his old high school, while students on both sides clapped and threw onions at him. Freud asks nothing at first, just listens. The man continues. At one point, the principal tried to speak, but he could only hum the national anthem backwards. And my mother, she was watching from the teacher's lounge. She clapped too, but she seemed disappointed. Freud does not laugh. He does not call it ridiculous. He underlines 3 words: soup, hallway, mother. Later, he will speak of nourishment, of fear of performance, of being devoured by expectations. But in this moment, he is only a collector, a librarian of dream archives with no index. In Freud's view, the mind had layers, a bit like an onion. There was the conscious self, the part making toast, tying shoelaces, politely nodding at parties. Then the preconscious, half-known memories, childhood phone numbers, song lyrics you thought you'd forgotten. And below that, the unconscious. This, he believed, was where the deepest desires lived, some so shy they could only speak in metaphor. The unconscious, in Freud's hands, was not evil. It was not dangerous. It was simply honest. Too honest for daylight. So it waited. And each night, when the conscious self finally fell quiet, it sent up messages, not letters, not paragraphs, but dream poems. Let's imagine another dream. A woman wakes in Freud's study. Her breath quickened. She had been dancing in a ballroom filled entirely with foxes wearing monocles. In the center of the dance floor, her father, playing chess with the stove. Her real father passed away 2 years prior. Freud asks her not what it means, but how it felt. She says, "Like I forgot something very important, but I kept dancing anyway." He nods. So much of Freud's work was not about symbols as absolute, but about their subjective weight. Yes, he believed in universals. He often overreached in assigning meaning. But the heart of his work was the belief that your dreams come from you. They are authored by you, staged by you, costumed, lit, soundtracked by you. And sometimes, even you don't know what they mean. Yet, to be clear, Freud didn't get everything right. He was a man of his time. There are limits, biases, places where his theories feel like antique tools trying to take apart a modern watch. And yet, the image of that couch remains, because it invited people to sit, to speak, to remember the dream from last Tuesday, the one with the missing train ticket and the shadow that knew your birthday. Freud reminded people that even the absurd might be profound, that nonsense might be code. That repetition might be trying to tell you something you've heard before, but never really understood. Let's flip through a few. Dreamt I was peeling a peach that never ended. My teeth fell out, but they clapped instead of crunched. I was trying to find my childhood dog, but he kept answering in my ex-boyfriend's voice. I was flying again. But this time I had to flap paperwork instead of wings. These were not Freud's dreams. These are ours. Yours, mine. The ones you forget before breakfast. The ones that leave a mood like fog caught in the ribs. The ones so startlingly clear you swear they must mean something, even if that something never quite makes it into words. Freud called dreaming the royal road to the unconscious. But it is not a paved road. It's a narrow forest trail, shifting every time you blink. And yet, with torch in hand, Freud walked it anyway. Back in the corridor, the light from Freud's office spills gently into the hallway. There is a metronome ticking slowly on his desk, a sculpted figure of a sphinx, several books underlined to the point of exhaustion, an ashtray filled with forgotten ash, and a faint trace of something earthy in the air. Not tobacco, not musk, but old thought. We thank him, quietly, not because he had all the answers, but because he asked the question. What do dreams mean? What are they? Signals, stories, trash fires from the brain's day processing unit, or something subtler, a stitched quilt from memory, instinct, longing, and misfiled emails, sewn blindly each night beneath the skin of sleep. Freud didn't claim certainty, only that it matters that we ask. And perhaps that's the most generous theory of all. The couch remains, empty now, but not unlistening. And in another room, a different figure settles into sleep, unaware that their next dream will involve a train that hums in music notes, a woman made entirely of seaweed, and a whispered phrase that makes no sense at all, but still makes them cry. Some dreams do not come in peace. They arrive uninvited, trailing static and sweat. They do not ask permission. They breach the walls of sleep like weather you forgot to expect. These are not the long, slow dreams of romantic yearning or mythic quest. These are the edge dreams, the brittle ones, the ones that whisper, "You haven't processed this yet." And sometimes it's not a dream at all. Sometimes it's what happens when the dreams go missing. It's 1974. In a makeshift army sleep lab tucked inside a Texas training facility, a soldier blinks under fluorescent light. He hasn't slept properly in 4 nights. Not just him, a handful of recruits. All of them are volunteers for a military sleep study, designed to observe what happens when rapid eye movement, REM sleep, is systematically withheld. The method isn't violent. They sleep, or try to. But each time their EEG registers a flicker of REM activity, the telltale twitch, the signal that dreaming has begun, a technician enters the room and gently wakes them. "Roll over, soldier." "Not yet. Stay awake just a little longer." Again and again, hour after hour, night after night. By the 5th night, something breaks. Not loudly, not with drama, but softly, like a string pulled quietly from a hem. The soldier begins crying while tying his boots. He can't say why. He says his shoelaces feel mournful. He says he keeps thinking of his dog from childhood, a memory he hadn't touched in years. But in his memory now, the dog is speaking German and has his father's face. The technicians write it down. Day 5. Soldier B. Spontaneous emotion. Hallucinatory recall of hybridized father-dog. Another recruit claims that the corner of his room is watching him. Not something in the corner, just the corner itself. He tries to explain it. Fails. Cups of coffee are replaced with stronger coffee. Cigarettes shake between fingers. A pin drops. No one laughs. This is not a dream anymore. This is what happens when dreaming is denied. Scientists have long known that REM sleep is vital, not just for rest, but for regulation. It is the time when the brain rinses itself in neurotransmitters, bathes its circuits in memory glue. When REM is starved, emotion has no drainpipe. Thoughts back up. The subconscious overflows into the waking world. It is less like sleeping poorly, and more like forgetting how to be a person. Back in the field lab, one volunteer scribbles a dream from a micro-nap. "I was trying to climb a ladder made of bubble wrap, but the ladder kept turning into regret." Another says he fell asleep for just 3 minutes and found himself trapped inside a grey hallway where every door led to a different unfinished conversation with his ex-wife. A third insists, with growing certainty, that someone replaced his dreams with someone else's, that they're not his anymore, that somehow, In the static of waking over and over and over again, his subconscious got hacked. This may sound extreme, but it echoes older truths. The Roman general Scipio was known to interview his soldiers about their dreams before battle. If too many of them dreamed of bad omens, he'd delay the march. A century later, the historian Artemidorus compiled one Era Critica, a book of dream interpretations using thousands of citizen-submitted dreams to advise emperors, traders, and commanders on next steps. They understood something modern science nearly forgot, that dreams are not indulgences. They are reports, weather maps from within, the field notes of the soul. Let's pause here. Let's imagine a dream that never arrived. A woman, 32, architect, nothing unusual in her chart, sleeps in a lab in Belgium. She's part of a study, though she doesn't know the specifics. Each night, she's woken just as her brain enters REM, gently, kindly, persistently. After 6 days, she begins laughing during dinner. Not joyful laughter, not even laughter with sound, just a wide, persistent smile that seems to say, everything is absurd, and I am not sure I exist. She stops recognizing the faces of researchers. She forgets the word for window, but remembers the color of every dress her grandmother wore between 1992 and 1998. The lab notes are calm, clinical. Subject W displayed enhanced memory retrieval, paired with emotional disorientation. Dreams remain inaccessible. Tearful episodes noted during red light exposure. But what do you call that? A dream starving in the body? A signal trying to push through static? Or simply a story that was never allowed to end? Now picture a different canvas entirely. A candlelit tent beneath vast Australian stars. The air is warm, crackling. A group of Yolngu elders listen as a child recounts their dream. The group nods. A word is shared. A phrase. The community does not ask, what did the dream mean? They ask, what does it ask you to do? Here, dreaming is a map of action, an instruction, even when cryptic. To some cultures, dreams are songs sung by ancestors through smoke. To others, they are echoes of lives we've lived before. In Papua New Guinea, if your dream involves a neighbor, it is often followed by a visit, a conversation, sometimes a ceremonial exchange of gifts, not because the dream was real, but because it held weight, and weight is real. Back in our dream corridor, we come to a new room. Here the light flickers slightly. The monitors buzz just a little louder. A poster on the wall reads, Effects of REM Deprivation, Week 3. The folder on the table is heavier. Inside, drawings by participants. A man curled inside a filing cabinet. A chair crying in a language made of punctuation. A map where the oceans are labeled maybe, and the continents all say yes, but only sometimes. You pause at one sketch. A figure floating above a staircase made of spoons. The caption reads, I dreamt this after 9 nights awake, but I wasn't asleep. Sometimes a dream is just noise. Sometimes it's digestion. But sometimes it is the mind's last gentle attempt to remind you, there is more here than survival. There is story, there is metaphor, there is a flashlight blinking in the forest, and it's you who left it there. Sleep is not escape, it's return to yourself, to the archive of symbols you've spent your whole life collecting. And when we deny ourselves that return, out of duty or trauma or habit, we forget something essential. We forget that even silence dreams, even pain dreams, even the parts of us too exhausted to speak, still hum quietly behind the eyes, hoping for a small curtain, a soft light, and 5 minutes of stage time. You close the folder, inhale gently, and continue down the corridor. There is one more monitor glowing ahead, and beyond it, a couch. Not Freud's this time, but something stranger, upholstered in questions you haven't asked yet. You sit and wait, because this time you want to see what dreams will come. Somewhere in a monastery that no longer stands, a monk dips his quill into dark ink. He pauses. He isn't transcribing scripture this time. He isn't recording the sequence of market days or rainfall or birth. No, tonight he is writing down a dream. It came to him the night before, just past the hour of matins, as snow gathered against the stone windows and the fire burned low. In his dream, he was walking through a village filled with birds, parrots, pigeons, crows, but they spoke only in Latin. He remembers one asking for figs, another reciting the Lord's Prayer backwards. He woke disoriented, but not afraid. And so, he writes it down, not because he seeks interpretation, but because he believes, like many of his time, that dreams are gifts, and gifts must not be refused. The dream scribes of old were not always scientists, not always philosophers. Some were monks, others midwives. A few were simply curious souls, with enough parchment and a sense that something in sleep deserved saving. In the Scivias, 12th century mystic Hildegard of Bingen recorded visions so vivid, wheels of fire, talking stars, gardens blooming with pain and song, that her dream books became sacred objects. In Egypt, temple priests etched dreams into limestone alongside prayers for the sick. Some slabs recorded the dreamer's offerings, a goose, a length of cloth, and noted whether the dreams had come from a god or merely from stew, too spicy the night before. In Babylon, a carved clay tablet holds this etched line: "If a man dreams of walking on water, he will rise above his enemies." Elsewhere, if he sees a lion in the mirror, he must cleanse himself with ash. These were not rules, but if-then guides, early algorithms of the soul. Let us walk now into one such archive, a candlelit chamber tucked behind the apothecary wing of an abbey. The air smells of beeswax and rain. Scrolls are stacked in bundles tied with cord, each marked with a symbol: star, cup, broken ladder. There is no clear system here, and that seems to be the point. Dreams defy indexing. A vellum page reads, "Brother Thomas dreamt of falling into a brass kettle. He awoke certain he had committed error. He confessed, though no sin was apparent." Another, "Sister Adelaide walked through a cloud of sheep. She awoke weeping. No one asked why." The monks made no claim to decode these. They simply wrote them down, because somewhere they believed this record mattered, that perhaps when the body is gone, the dream remains, and someone someday might read it and recognize something unnamed. Now let us journey further, to a cuneiform tablet from 3000 BCE, discovered near the banks of the Euphrates. It is small, clay, marked in wedges. It tells of a priest who dreamt of being swallowed by a fish, only to emerge on the shore with fire in his hands. This might sound familiar. Jonah and the whale, echoed centuries later. Or it might simply be one of those dreams that travel through time and language, shedding names but keeping symbols intact. To dream of being swallowed is not uncommon. To be devoured, lost, dissolved, and yet to emerge changed, fire in hand, knowledge burning the palm. This is the arc of so many dreams. Not explanation, but transformation. Elsewhere, in 10th century Japan, Han aristocrats performed a New Year's ritual known as Hatsuyume, the first dream. It was believed that the symbols in one's first sleep of the year foretold one's fate, the most auspicious combination. Mount Fuji, a hawk, and an eggplant. An odd trio, and scholars still debate its meaning. But perhaps that's the point. Maybe the power of the dream lies in its absurdity, the way the symbols jostle your ordinary logic. Say Fuji, and you taste majesty. Say hawk, and your skin thinks of speed. Say eggplant, and something in you chuckles. You may not know why, but you feel it matters, which, in dreaming, is often enough. Let's step now into the margins. Not every dream was inked on scrolls or tablets. Some were whispered at dawn over shared porridge. In medieval Iceland, feuds were sometimes fueled by dreams. You could accuse someone not of theft or insult, but of dream slander, the crime of spreading a false dream about another. If your neighbor claimed you appeared in their dream, plotting revenge or consorting with spirits, that testimony could be brought to court. You might stand trial not for your actions, but for how your image appeared inside someone else's subconscious. It seems ridiculous, and yet what could be more vulnerable? To be told you did something in someone's dream that you cannot remember, that you did not do, or perhaps might have. Where does responsibility end? What counts as real? And how much power do we have over the versions of ourselves conjured while someone else sleeps? Now, back in the corridor, we find a small alcove. Inside, a linen-bound dream book rests on a wooden stand. No title, just a ribbon. The page it's open to reads, "The symbols drift, across borders, across names. The foot dreams in Hungary, the staircase in Peru, the spilled milk in Tehran." These are not shared memories, but something older, something deeper. These are archetypes beginning to stir. Symbols not owned by culture or decade, but carried in the blood like lullabies. Pause here, if you wish. Look through this next window. A scene plays out softly. A woman, late 30s, modern clothes, sits alone on a train, asleep. Her head tilts gently against the glass. Her dream, invisible to others, unfolds like a stage play. She is in a library made of vines. Each book breathes. She opens one and finds the dream of someone else. A child from 500 years ago. She doesn't understand the language, but she feels the fear and then the warmth. She closes the book, places it back, and keeps walking. Maybe dreams do this. Maybe they travel further than we think. Maybe, tucked inside every REM cycle, is a thread, long and golden, linking us to dreamers whose names we've never spoken. A grandmother who saw a wolf on her wedding night and told no one. A midwife who dreamt of fire in the shape of a bell. A prisoner who dreamt of the sea so vividly he cried for joy upon waking, even though he would never see it. Their dreams are not lost, only unspoken. And in this corridor, in this museum of not quite night and not quite story, we are here to honor them, to write them down, even if only in breath. Before you go, one last entry. A single dream fragment, written in charcoal on the back of a torn label. I was being chased, but not out of fear. I just needed to know who would follow me. And in that moment, we remember. Sometimes dreams do not predict. They do not explain. They reveal. A glimpse of the self with its costume off. A thought we were not brave enough to finish. A version of you who already knows something you haven't named. Another dream waits. And this time, it might be yours. Some dreams feel scripted. The phone won't dial. The door doesn't lock. You keep running, but your legs, traitorous and slow, move through syrup or sand. Someone is waiting, just ahead or just behind, but you never reach them. You wake with heart pounding and a breath that doesn't belong to any room you know. But some dreams don't follow the rules. Instead of running, you stop. You turn. You ask the figure chasing you, "What do you want?" And they look surprised, as if you weren't supposed to ask. And just like that, everything changes. You are dreaming, and you know it. Welcome to lucidity. Lucid dreaming isn't rare. It happens to many people without effort. A side effect of stress, meditation, accident, or simply the odd generosity of the sleeping brain. But for some, lucidity becomes a practice, an art, a nightly theater where awareness meets imagination, and the dreamer becomes director. The first written account comes from the 8th century by a philosopher named Ibn Sirin, who described how prophets in Islam distinguished between true dreams, ordinary ones, and the self-aware guiding vision. Much later, in 1913, Dutch psychiatrist Frederik van Eden coined the term lucid dream to describe his own shimmering remembered visions. He wrote, "In these lucid dreams, the reintegration of the psychic functions is so complete that the sleeper remembers day life and his own condition, reaches a state of perfect awareness, and is able to direct his attention and to attempt different acts of free volition. In other words, you're awake, inside your sleep. You may have done this already. Perhaps you found yourself mid-dream, staring down at your hands, counting your fingers, or noticed the clouds above you swirl like paint, and thought, this isn't real. And instead of waking, you chose to stay. That's the beauty of it. Lucidity doesn't mean control. It means presence. You are not a puppet in a dream. You are a guest who has learned the host's language. Let me tell you a story. A woman dreams of a train, speeding through a night that curves. The other passengers are silent, some made of paper, some blank-faced. But the woman feels calm. She lifts a spoon from her teacup, and it stretches in her hand like warm wax. She looks around and thinks, this isn't real. She whispers aloud, I'm dreaming. The paperman beside her nods. You are. Can I change things? He shrugs. She closes her eyes, thinks of her mother's garden, opens them, and the train car is filled with dahlias. Lucid dreaming is not magic. It is not bulletproof, but it is wonder. With clarity, you become a collaborator with your subconscious, a co-author of your own nighttime theater. Some use it to fly, some for healing, others just to sit quietly at the edge of a dream, watching it unfold like a film they already love. Stanford University, 1975. A young man lies in a lab bed, his brain gently wired to an EEG. Researchers hover nearby, alert. This man is a trained lucid dreamer. He has learned how to perform specific tasks while dreaming, and more importantly, how to signal from within the dream. How? By moving his eyes. You see, even though the body lies still in REM sleep, locked in a soft paralysis that protects the body from acting out dreams, the eyes remain active. They dart beneath closed lids, scanning imagined rooms, reading signs that never existed, watching staircases bend toward impossible angles. And so this dreamer was trained to move his eyes, left, right, left, once lucid. The results? Verified. Over and over again, dreamers signaled from within dreams. The lab saw the eye movements. The sleepers later recalled them. Lucidity had been proven, not just claimed, but measured. From then on, the dream labs of the world began whispering to each other with renewed excitement. Lucid dreaming is real. It can be trained. It can be mapped. And for some, it can be lived in. Let's enter one now. You find yourself atop a rooftop. The city below hums with amber light, but no sound reaches you. You breathe deeply and smell nothing. That's your first clue. The air is still, the stars too sharp. You jump gently and float. Your feet lift from the tiles, and for a moment you flail, afraid. Then you laugh. A feather brushes past your shoulder. A paper airplane hovers beside you, inviting competition. You twirl once, twice, and just before you think of flying too high, you pause and choose instead to explore, to walk through that crooked hallway again, this time on your own terms. No chase, no fear, just questions. But lucidity has more than thrill. It has utility. In Malaysia, the Senoi people were once described, perhaps imperfectly, but still beautifully, as a culture that encouraged dream teaching. Each morning, children were invited to share their dreams. If the dream had a fear in it, the child was taught to confront it. If a monster chased them, they should turn and ask the monster what it wants. If they fell, they should learn to fly. The goal? Agency. Lucidity, not for spectacle, but for strength. Imagine if every child learned that they could face their fear first in dreams. What courage might spill into waking life. Back in our corridor, a door glows softly. Inside, someone dreams of a room with no ceiling. They look up and see clouds made of questions. Each time they answer one, it melts into mist. They smile. Somewhere nearby, a researcher notes, subject exhibits adaptive lucidity. No one defines that term. No one needs to. Some dreams only reveal what we are ready to navigate, and sometimes just noticing we're dreaming is enough. Let's pause with one final vignette. A man lies in bed, paralyzed by the weight of loss. Every dream brings reminders, old voices, missed calls, laughter that no longer echoes in his real house. One night, he dreams again, But this time, he recognizes the shape of the garden from a childhood photo and thinks, "Ah, I must be dreaming." He walks to the window and opens it, and there, on the porch, is the person he lost. Not speaking, not waving, just present. He sits beside them. They do not talk. And when he wakes, he is not fixed, but he is changed. Lucidity is not just control. It is permission. To linger, to listen, to grieve with gentleness. Not every dream is lucid. Many are chaos, joyful, confusing, wild, and that's good, that's healthy. But every now and then, when a dream pauses and asks, "Are you paying attention?" there is a kind of magic in saying, "Yes, I am. Let's see what happens next." The first lucid steps are small, but they lead to wings. There was a time when the dream was a secret, locked in the vault behind your eyes. It vanished before noon, dissolving into breakfast chatter, into emails, into the ordinary weight of daylight. It was yours alone, private, untouchable. But then we built machines that could listen. It starts with wires, delicate, clear, pressed gently against the scalp. Each wire a scout, sent to listen to the soft orchestra of your sleeping mind. They don't hear thoughts exactly. They don't read dreams like subtitles, but they catch pulses, bursts of electricity, waves of intent so ancient they barely remember language. It's called an EEG, an electroencephalogram, translated loosely, the writing of the brain's electricity. The lines it draws look like mountain ranges, or the edges of lightning, or the tremble of a violin string just after it's been plucked. For decades, scientists studied these waves, hoping to catch REM sleep in the act. And they did. Ben. Rapid eye movement is when the good stuff happens. The dreams with drama, with flying, with talking refrigerators, with broken staircases that somehow lead to forgiveness. REM is when the brain lights up like a city at night, certain regions glowing brightly, others going dark, like neighborhoods shifting power in a storm. It turns out, the dreaming brain is not resting. It's staging a play. The actors, fragments of memory, stray emotions, whispering fears, and misplaced information from a podcast you barely listened to. The director? Unknown, but very creative. The set designer? A genius with a fondness for impossible physics and unexpected childhood cameos. Let's walk into one of those control rooms. The setting? A softly lit neuroscience lab in Kyoto, the year 2013. Inside, a volunteer sleeps in a scanner. Not just any scanner, an fMRI machine that maps blood flow in the brain second by second. It doesn't read thoughts, but it does show where energy gathers, where oxygen rushes, where stories are being made. As the volunteer dreams, the machine watches, the images their brain conjures. A clock, a key, a face leave patterns behind, trails of heat, spikes of signal. A computer compares these spikes to a visual database, assembled from the subject's own waking perceptions, and when the sleeper wakes, they're asked, "What did you see?" They answer, "A lamp, a hallway, a giraffe with my sister's voice." The researchers smile, because the brain scan had already shown it. The lamp, the hallway, the silhouette of a long-necked figure. They had, for the first time, glimpsed the dream as it happened. Not perfectly, not clearly, but close enough to name. Let's be clear, this is not mind reading. It is not espionage. Your dreams are not being stolen. They are being translated, very, very slowly, from pulses into pictures, from shadows into data. It's as if your brain was speaking a dialect only a few machines understand, and even then just barely. Like translating whale song through stained glass. But the implications are profound. What if we could see what the brain sees? What if memory, fantasy, longing, and terror all leave a visible echo? Would we understand ourselves better? Would we be comforted? Or would we feel exposed? Back in our dream corridor, we pass a glowing tablet. On it, sketches of the human brain, softly annotated in candlelight. A line connects the hippocampus to a watercolor of a staircase. A note reads, "Memory pathways, spiral design." A curled paper clip marks another page. Amygdala lights up during nightmares. Emotional translation point. The brain is not a map. It is a garden. It does not run in lines. It flows. Synapses bloom. Memories reseed themselves in new corners. A scent from childhood finds new meaning at 43. A heartbreak from 2008 quietly morphs into a recurring dream of missing socks. Nothing is lost. Everything is, and dreams are where the remix is loudest. Some researchers believe that dreaming is the mind's way of running simulations, preparing you for threats, for love, for embarrassment. Others argue that dreams are pure noise, a byproduct of neural housekeeping, a kind of mental digestion. But then, why do some dreams change us? Why do we remember one particular image for decades? A red balloon, a missing tooth, a door that opened to reveal only music. Not everything helpful needs to be logical. Some knowledge comes in riddles. And dreaming, perhaps, is the oldest riddle we tell ourselves. Let's pause again. A girl, 9 years old, dreams of a fox. It stands in her kitchen, gently rearranging the magnets on the fridge. She watches. The fox turns to her and says, "You're worrying too early." She tells no one. 10 years later, she remembers. In a moment of fear, the phrase returns, "You're worrying too early." She doesn't know what it means, but something in her settles. Is that memory? Is that dream therapy? Or is it just the wisdom of a fox she never met? Here's what we know. In REM sleep, the brain's visual and emotional centers light up dramatically. The prefrontal cortex, home of logic and restraint, goes quiet. This is why dreams feel real, even when they are absurd. It's why you forgive the flying elephant. It's why your ex can be both your dentist and your tour guide in the same breath. The dream cares not for consistency, only connection, and meaning often arrives after the dream ends, like a message translated posthumously, a letter that had to be sent through fire. Some labs are developing AI models trained on brain scans, hoping to predict dream content more precisely. They use thousands of hours of image recognition. They partner brainwave patterns with vision models. They whisper to the sleeping mind, "Show us what you see." And sometimes they get close. A spiral, a face, a house with too many rooms. But other times, the dream refuses to play along. It hides, it changes, it slips out the back door and grows new legs. Because dreams are not data, they are language shaped like vapor. We do not always know their dialect, but we know when they've spoken. Let me tell you one more story. A patient recovering from trauma begins to have the same dream every night. A corridor, a locked room. Behind the door, her younger self, crying. At first she cannot open the door. But then, during therapy, she's taught to re-enter the dream gently, lucidly. The next time she finds the door, she knocks. The child inside opens it. They sit. And when the dream ends, the adult does not wake in fear. She wakes with stillness, not peace. At the beginning of it, some dreams are nightmares, some are nonsense, but some are messages wrapped in code. A poem your brain sends you when it has no other way to speak. And decoding it, that's not always about science. Sometimes it's about kindness, the willingness to listen, even when you don't understand the words. The dream corridor continues, but now we carry new tools, not just wires and charts, but intuition, memory, patience, and the knowledge that even in sleep, something in us watches and waits and whispers. Imagine dreaming as a kind of swimming, not across a pool, not even through the ocean, but through something stranger, an invisible current that folds around you, presses against your skin, and whispers in a voice you once heard in childhood but never learned to translate. Now imagine that place has depth. REM sleep is the deep end, and we dive in every night. Rapid eye movement, REM, is where the big dreams live. when your eyes flicker under closed lids like film reels catching frames, when your muscles go still, a gentle paralysis, protective and strange, while your mind becomes a moving picture. Some call RE a paradoxical sleep, because even as your body stills, your brain blooms. Oxygen rushes through the occipital cortex. The visual field explodes with possibility. The limbic system, your emotional compass, lights up like a sky of private fireworks. And always, quietly, your eyes dart. Left, right, left again. Following someone you'll never meet. Down a hallway that won't stay still. In a research facility in Tokyo, a man is sleeping underwater. Not literally, but it feels that way. He's submerged inside a sensory deprivation chamber, warm, weightless. Wires trail from his scalp like jellyfish tendrils. Monitors beep. Outside the tank, a researcher jots notes in careful brushstrokes. She is watching his REM signature, watching the tide of his sleep rise. She does not know what he is dreaming, but she imagines, perhaps, that he is dreaming of water. Later, she will learn that he dreamt of a fox teaching calculus inside a submarine carved from driftwood, and that, somehow, it felt helpful. REM dreams are often where the surreal logic appears, not because the brain is broken, but because it has permission. The outer editors, the ones that say too weird, makes no sense, that's not possible, are quieted during REM, asleep inside the sleep, and what's left is imagery, symbol, sensation unfiltered. You dream of riding a spoon down a mountain made of teeth, and it feels noble. You sit inside a refrigerator made of light, and it feels like justice. You return to your childhood kitchen and find your grandmother made of bees, and it feels, somehow, inevitable. Let's linger here, in the REM sea. A dreamer floats through a coral tunnel lined with velvet postcards. Each one pulses with memory. On the left, a birthday you forgot to attend. On the right, a word you said too quickly. They sway in warm currents. You want to speak, but your mouth is full of feathers. You nod instead, and the dream nods back. REM is not random. It repeats. Roughly every 90 minutes, your body circles back. Deeper layers of non-REM, then up again to the fizzing light of REM. Your first REM stage is short. The second, longer. By morning, your REM sleep may last an hour or more. A final film reel, spinning your unfinished scenes into surreal closing acts. Some believe this is when consolidation happens, emotional housekeeping. The mind pulls in old fears, blends them with recent events, and tries to make meaning, like an editor with too many clips and not enough labels. And so, the symbols become slippery. A pink shoe becomes an apology. An upside-down tree becomes a decision not yet made. A balloon shaped like a thumb becomes a question. Are you ready now? Let me show you a fragment recovered from a dream journal in Copenhagen. I was underwater, but breathing fine. I followed a staircase of whales. At the top, a room filled with phone chargers. I remember thinking, this is what forgiveness looks like. Can science explain that? Should it try? Or is it better sometimes to just honor the dream, to say yes? That was the shape of forgiveness in this moment, and I remember it now. Researchers have found that dream content often correlates with waking emotion. If you're anxious, your dreams may be chaotic. If you're grieving, your dreams might quiet you or flood you. But REM has a peculiar ability to take strong emotions and reshape them. It's not just catharsis, it's meaning-making. Some call it overnight therapy. The brain plays out your fears in costumes. It lets you run the same loop, again and again, until one day you stop running. You face the staircase. You ask the tiger its name, and it answers. Let me offer a dream from a patient named Kay. Each night, she dreamed of drowning, lake water up to her lips. Cold, thick, panic rising. One night, inside REM, something shifted. As the water came, she saw a turtle, slow, calm, unafraid. She held onto its shell. It carried her to the bottom, and there, the water glowed. She woke smiling. and never dreamed of drowning again. In REM, time warps. A dream lasting seconds can feel endless. 1 hour of REM can birth scenes spanning generations. This is because dreaming does not follow clock logic. It follows association. The door reminds you of summer. The summer reminds you of your sister's laugh. Her laugh becomes a song. The song becomes a hallway. The hallway leads to a question you never answered. The dream doesn't care about order. It cares about connection. And in REM, the threads spool beautifully, even if they knot. We should talk briefly about goldfish. They sleep, not deeply, and they don't close their eyes, no eyelids, but they do drift into rhythmic rest. We don't know if they dream, but scientists have noticed something in zebrafish. During certain rest phases, their neurons flicker in organized patterns, akin to REM in mammals, which means maybe fish dream. Maybe the ocean is filled with thoughts you'll never meet. A sleeping squid has been filmed changing colors in patterns, stripes, pulses, blooms, as it rests inside coral crevices. Some believe these are dreams in motion, the squid reliving moments, rehearsing camouflage, telling itself a story in color, and no one is watching, except maybe us. Just now, back in our corridor, we find a room filled with floating dream reports. One scroll reads, "Subject, dreamt of a fish playing piano with seaweed fingers." The tune was familiar. Another reads, "Dreamer D described a submarine theater with audience made entirely of raccoons. They clapped politely. These are not nonsense. They are sensory dressed, emotion in disguise, the brain's way of laughing and revealing something at the same time." Sometimes, researchers try to influence dreams. It's called targeted dream incubation. They play sounds, whisper words, deliver cues during sleep, hoping to steer the dream gently toward a theme. Want to dream of creativity? They whisper paint and sky. Want to dream of a loved one? They play the faint sound of their voice. It doesn't always work, but when it does, the results are tender. A dreamer hears a piano, dreams of their late grandmother playing a song. They wake in tears. And gratitude. The science is new, but the impulse is old. To plant a seed in the dreaming mind and water it with meaning. In the final chamber of section 7, you find an aquarium-shaped bed. Someone is sleeping inside it. On the glass, projected symbols. A fish, a fox, a question mark wrapped in vines. Below them, a line of text. REM 4.7, subject entering symbolic resolution phase. You smile because you've been here too. The ocean of REM is not always kind, but it is rarely cruel. It takes what you carry and paints it into scenes you can hold. It may be odd, it may be absurd, but somewhere in the swirl you might find yourself in a kitchen made of whispers, on a mountain of spoons, in a theater of starlight where your hands glow like old questions, and the lights dim just long enough for you to say, "I remember." And then you wake. In waking life, time is a ruler, precise, impatient, always marching. But in dreams, time drips, time folds, time hums under its breath like an old lullaby. No one taught it. Dreams are where time lets go of its manners, where a minute stretches wide enough to hold an entire childhood, and a century fits into a sip of tea. You do not notice it until you wake, until you check the clock beside your bed and think, that dream was forever. How was it only 20 minutes? Because in dreams, the clocks do not care what you think. Let's walk now into the forest where time unravels. It isn't a dense forest, more of a glade really, but the trees all wear clocks. Grandfather clocks, wristwatches, digital screens tied to roots. Some tick forward, some blink sideways. Some pause entirely, exhaling fog like a bored librarian. The dreamer walks past them barefoot. She does not try to interpret. She simply listens, as one clock rings midnight and the next chimes beginning. Neuroscientists have spent decades trying to understand how the brain interprets time during REM. One study found that when lucid dreamers were asked to count 10 seconds in a dream, using eye movements as markers. They often took a little longer than 10 seconds in real-world time, not wildly so, just enough to say the dream was moving at a slightly slower tempo. But other studies reveal the opposite. Some dreamers accomplish long, elaborate quests in what appears to be only a few minutes of sleep. So which is it? Slower? Faster? The answer is yes. Dream time is not one speed. It moves according to meaning, not measurement. When grief is present, it lingers. When joy explodes, it races. And when confusion enters, time doubles back and introduces itself twice. Let me tell you about a dream I once heard. A man enters a hallway filled with calendars. Each door leads to a different year of his life. He walks into age 9 and hears his mother singing. He walks into 32 and sees himself finishing a crossword. He tries to open the door for next year, but it has no handle. He knocks anyway, and inside, something knocks back. He wakes up weeping. He never liked calendars after that. Time is not just length. Time is texture. In dreams, we feel this more than ever. A moment of embarrassment repeats endlessly, looping like a scratched record. A small kiss you forgot in daylight reappears in dream, magnified by warmth, echoing like a cathedral bell. Some dreams last no time at all. They appear as symbols, a feather dropping, a flame bursting, a locked box opening, and they leave you changed. One flash, that's all. But you carry it for years. Cultures throughout history have treated time differently in dreams. In Aboriginal Australian cosmology, dream time is not a sleep state, but a sacred time. A once upon a time that is always now. It's the moment of creation repeating itself. You do not remember dream time. You participate in it. Every dream walk retraces the steps of the ancestors, revealing maps not only across land, but across meaning. In Tibetan Buddhism, there's the concept of dream yoga, a practice where time becomes layered. One trains in lucidity to better recognize illusion, working toward insight that defies the clock entirely. And in modern neuroscience labs, someone in a white coat stares at a blinking cursor and tries to measure whether the dream ran 1.2 times faster than waking speech. They are not wrong, but they are only measuring one part of the fabric. Because when you dream, you do not ask for the time. You feel the shape of it. Back in the corridor, there is a soft cafe waiting. Tiny espresso cups arranged on velvet cloth. A figure sits at a table, alone. She is explaining how time works in dreams, not in a lecture, but in a conversation with a moth. The moth nods politely. Between sips, she says, "Real time is a myth anyway. I've been 17 for decades in my dreams. My knees never hurt." The moth responds, "You've also been ancient and unborn, and a pencil once, remember?" She laughs, and it sounds like bells ringing backward. Some dreamers report looping dreams, not recurring over many nights, but looping within themselves. You try to leave the room. You return. You try again. The hallway turns inward. The staircase leads to the same landing. You begin to panic, but then you pause, sit on the step, and say, "Okay, I'll wait." The dream shifts. The hallway breathes, and you are somewhere else. Dreams are not puzzles, but they often respond well to patience. Let's speak now of premonition. Not in the mystical sense, though that has value too, but in the psychological. Sometimes we dream of things before we recognize their meaning in waking life. You dream of a crumbling house, weeks before learning a loved one is ill. You dream of being buried in sand, then later realize you've felt emotionally smothered for months. The event doesn't come from the dream, but the recognition does. Dreams play the long game. They plant images before you understand why. And time, slippery, generous, lets you catch up at your own pace. Let me share another. A woman is trapped in a tower. Each window shows a different decade of her life. In one, she is 3, running with cereal stuck to her cheek. In another, she is 50, dancing without shoes at her niece's wedding. She wants to open a window, but the handles dissolve. At the top of the tower, she finds a clock. Its hands move in opposite directions. She sits beside it and waits. When she wakes, she is calm. She doesn't know what it meant, but she now writes letters to her past self, and sometimes she answers them. Some scientists believe we could one day record dreams in time-stamped segments, to watch them back like films, to pause and rewind. A strange idea, but would you? Would you want to see the whole dream, frame by frame? Or is its blurriness part of the charm? We rarely remember an entire dream. We remember moments, glints, outtakes, as if the dream itself edits what we're allowed to keep. A curator of time who sometimes lets you sneak into the archive. Just once, a final thought. Dreams do not measure time. They hold it for safekeeping, not seconds, not hours, but memories that outgrow their containers. An apology waiting for the right heartbeat. A reunion impossible in waking life, but perfect in 3 a.m. REM space. And sometimes, a minute so beautiful, it feels like a season. You live through it. And then, like all dreamscapes, you wake, not always sure how long you were gone, only that something stayed with you, like perfume, like poetry, like a watch that never ticks again, but still tells the right time, once you stop asking. When you sleep, the curtain rises, not always sharply, not with trumpets or fanfare, but softly, like a spotlight gradually brightening on a stage that was always there, waiting. No ushers, no tickets. You are the audience. You are the actor. You are the playwright, fumbling for the script with ink still drying. The dreaming mind is a theater, and every night it builds a show for one. Behind the eyes, the brain hums. It's no longer just thinking, it's staging. Your prefrontal cortex, the stern conductor of waking life, eases into dimmed silence. Meanwhile, your visual cortex grabs the spotlight. The limbic system tunes the emotional orchestra. The hippocampus rolls out reels of memory like film. There is no rehearsal, only premiere, only improvisation. The brain sifts through your day's debris, the eye contact you didn't quite understand, the half-formed fear, the word you meant to say but swallowed, and begins to shape it, not with words, but with symbols, not with logic, but with choreography. Step onto the stage. The first prop, a library made of smoke. You are searching for a book. You open a drawer full of melted watches. In the corner, someone you loved, or might love still, is whispering to a plant. It turns slowly toward you and says, "We were always going to end like this." You nod. You don't know why. But the dream keeps going. This is not nonsense. This is emotion, embodied. Scientists have watched the dreaming brain activate the same regions tied to fear, lust, love, shame. The amygdala glows like a candle beneath bone. Even in sleep, our feelings perform. And yet, curiously, the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, home of logic and self-awareness, dims during REM. That's why we believe our dreams, why we accept flying as walking, why we recognize a faceless figure as our cousin Mark, despite the fact that Mark hasn't worn feathers since ever. The dream doesn't care for facts, it cares for impact. Think of your memory as a prop room, messy, layered, not in order. Some props are new, a sound from yesterday, a billboard you barely noticed. Others are ancient, your first lunchbox, your grandmother's perfume, the hallway from second grade. The dreamer's brain pulls them from the shelves, and then, with exquisite mischief, arranges them into a scene. The staircase from your school, the feeling you had reading that book last summer, the lizard from the zoo trip in 2006. Together, they mean something now, even if you won't remember it in the morning. Freud called dreams the royal road to the unconscious. Carl Jung went further. He believed dreams were more than wish fulfillment or emotional echoes. He believed they were communication from the self, capital S, the deep, guiding intelligence beneath ego. He saw dream characters as archetypes: the shadow, the wise old woman, the trickster. Each figure, not just a random guest star, but a signal flare, a message, a puzzle piece meant to be held, turned, and eventually recognized. Let me offer you a scene. The brain casts you in a role, museum security guard. But the museum is full of your childhood art. Each room contains a project you forgot. A crayon whale, a macaroni sun, a birthday card made for no one. You walk between exhibits. Suddenly, an alarm sounds. A glass case is broken. Someone has stolen the word you were about to speak. You wake and remember nothing, only that you feel bereft. The brain stage is built from memory, but the performance is always now. In 2022, a group of researchers built a model of dream rehearsal. They posited that dreams function like training grounds, places where we rehearse scenarios, especially unresolved ones. Social tension, threats, conflicts, regrets. The props may be absurd: raccoons in business suits, pancakes that cry, but the core of the drama remains. Your boss disappoints you in real life. That night, in dream, you rescue a kitten from a collapsing office tower while someone yells about spreadsheets. You emerge triumphant, not because it makes sense, but because it resolves the tension. The play ends. You wake calmer, maybe. Dreams are not tidy. They have no act structure, but they do obey a rhythm. Often confusion, confrontation, transformation. The figures may change, but the motion persists. You're late to school. You argue with the sun. You forgive the fox. You fly. Curtain. Let's step into another room now. Here, the dreaming brain is cast as choreographer. The stage is your body. You dream you're dancing, but really, your limbs twitch. Tiny movements, micro motions that echo the dream's rhythm. Someone dreams of running. Their legs tug faintly at the blanket. Someone dreams of singing. Their throat hums a fragment in their sleep. In REM, the brain and body rehearse together, not full motion, but small reminders. You are more than stillness. You are story in motion, even without conscious will. In this corridor, we come to a theater with no seats, only mirrors. Each mirror shows a scene from a different dream. You, but taller. You, but scared. You, but made of paper, holding a sign that reads, "I was not invited, but I came anyway." You stare. The mirror blinks, and someone behind you says that role is still open. You turn. No one there. Dreams stage things you haven't owned yet. Fear you denied. Desire you edited out. But the theater remembers, and sometimes with compassion. It casts you in those roles until you recognize them. And forgive. Not all dreams are symbolic. Some are loud. Some are blunt. You scream. You fall. You lose a tooth in front of your entire graduating class. Again, these are called theme dreams. They don't change much. They repeat. They nag. They shout the same scene till you write a new ending. Until you return to that stage and say, "This time, I sing." Let me offer a dream that lingered in someone's journal for years. She dreamed of speaking to a classroom full of sleeping children. She was trying to explain poetry, but the children kept snoring. One opened an eye and said, "Maybe you're explaining it too hard." She woke, wrote that sentence down, and changed her entire lecture style. Sometimes, the brain uses the stage to teach itself. You are actor and audience, playwright and critic. You forget the play by lunch, but the lesson stays. Before we exit this section, look up. The ceiling here is a chalkboard. Words appear briefly, then fade. A few remain longer. You don't have to remember the script to live the lesson. The monster was wearing your shoes. Sometimes you dream to rehearse leaving. Other times to practice staying. You sit. Let the lights dim. Feel the applause of your own subconscious. It never needed an audience, but it performs anyway. Because performance is how the brain processes, even in silence, Even in sleep, there is a forest made entirely of signs, but none of them point anywhere. Each tree trunk is carved carefully, thoughtfully, with a single symbol. Some are familiar: ladder, key, snake, house. Others feel older, stranger. A wheel with too many spokes, a cup turned upside down, a window with no glass. This is the symbol forest. We do not come here to decode. We come to recognize. Dreams speak in symbols, not as secrets, but as shortcuts. The brain has little time during REM. It must translate feeling into image, instinct into scene. So instead of telling you, "I fear being forgotten," it shows you a locked door behind your childhood home, slightly ajar, flickering with dust, and a light bulb swinging too slowly. Instead of declaring, "I long for release," it drops you from the sky with outstretched arms, knowing you will understand as your chest expands in flight. This is not mystery. This is metaphor under moonlight. This is the language dreams never had to learn, because it was always theirs. Some symbols are cross-cultural. The serpent feared, revered, transformed again and again. The stair ascending, descending, spiraling like breath. The mirror, revelation, illusion, double truth. Carl Jung believed these were more than images. He called them archetypes, patterns we carry without being taught. They arise again and again in our dreams because they arise again and again in us, not from books, from being human. Let's walk beneath the branches. Here is the tree of teeth, each leaf shaped like a molar, slightly yellowed, swaying softly. Dreamers have reported losing teeth for centuries. It's the third most common dream motif in global studies. Some interpret it as fear of aging. Others say it represents loss of control, of beauty, of power. But a 14-year-old boy once wrote, "I keep dreaming my teeth fall out because I never say what I mean." And maybe that's truest. Maybe the toothful dream is a symbol of held words, of the sentence you never finished, the letter never sent, the truth that needed chewing, but you swallowed instead. The path curves now. Ahead, a fox waits. Its eyes reflect like mirrors. It does not blink. In many traditions, the fox is a messenger. In Japanese kitsune stories, the fox is a bridge between the human world and the spirit one. In Celtic lore, a guide through the in-between. In dreams, it's neither threat nor comfort, only a question, walking. You step forward, the fox does not move, only says, "Do you recognize this place?" You don't reply. But you do. You've never seen it before. And yet, it feels exactly like last Tuesday. Only quieter. Not all symbols are ancient. Some are newly born in our digital sleep. The dreamer finds themselves inside an interface, a never-ending inbox, a feed that scrolls forever but never refreshes, a notification bell you cannot silence. These are symbols too, modern ones. Our subconscious does not distinguish between cave paintings and apps. It only asks, what is your attention tied to? Then builds a stage from that. In the center of the forest, a clearing. Here lies the archive of doors. Wooden ones, iron gates, elevator doors opening to the wrong floor. Each door glows faintly with prior passage. Dreamers have stepped through these before. Sometimes the door leads to childhood, sometimes to a new job you haven't been offered yet, sometimes to a version of you still rehearsing who they're becoming. A man once described a dream in which he opened a refrigerator and found a desert. He felt, somehow, relieved. Make of that what you will. The dream already has. There is no universal dictionary, no definitive dream. Rosetta Stone. For one person, a snake means danger. For another, rebirth. For another, a pet they lost during the pandemic and still grieve at night. Symbols are not owned. They are worn. And sometimes they outgrow us. Let's step back into the forest. Here, a woman kneeling beside a suitcase. She opens it. Inside, 3 objects. A bell, a single glove, a train ticket marked with her childhood handwriting. She takes the bell and begins to ring it. But the sound is silence. She wakes unsettled. Months later, in waking life, she remembers the dream. She is packing her mother's belongings after her passing. She finds a box labeled odd keepsakes. Inside, the same three objects. No bell, but the same glove, the same train ticket. Dreams don't predict, but sometimes they prepare. A pause now. We step into a small temple, tucked into the roots of a willow. Inside, cultures gather, whispering symbols across generations. In this chamber, Egyptian scarabs crawl across sandstone. Celtic knots pulse like heartbeats. Mayan glyphs blink open in patterns. Not yet translator. A dream catcher hangs gently in the air, filtering light into spiral rainbows. A QR code spins slowly above a stone bowl. Unreadable but persistent. The symbols shift. Sometimes they merge, and you realize none of them are foreign, only waiting to be known. Why do we dream in symbols? Because feelings are not sentences. And sometimes the only way the heart can explain what it knows is to draw a picture in your sleep. Let me give you one more. A woman dreams of dropping a spoon. It falls endlessly. She leans over the edge of a long staircase, watching it fall for what feels like hours. She says nothing, just listens. When she wakes, she writes down, "It fell like a truth I didn't catch in time." Later, in therapy, that image becomes a touchstone. Whenever something needs saying and trembles on her tongue, she imagines the spoon and catches it. One last path through the forest. Here, dreamers have gathered. Some lie on blankets shaped like question marks. Others lean against trees that hum with heartbeat percussion. Each person holds a symbol, cupped in their palms like birds. One holds a floating balloon, tied to an apology they still owe. Another cradles a tiny chair, a seat they were never offered. Another unwraps a stone shaped like a yes they never gave. They do not trade them. They only show them. Because sometimes, sharing the symbol is enough. No explanation, no thesis. Only, this came to me, I carried it, and someone else says, me too. The forest dims, the fox is gone, but you're still holding something. In your palm, warm. Not everything needs to be spoken aloud. Some messages arrive in images, and stay, like a seed, waiting, until your waking life finally grows the soil they need. There's a hallway you've walked before, though not quite like this. On one side, a row of arched mirrors. On the other, not more mirrors, but you're never quite sure what's. Soft walls, shadow, glass turned inward. The floor glows gently, as though lit from underneath by something thinking. This is the mirrored hall. Time slips here, so does memory, and sometimes reflection itself. Mirrors in dreams are not just surfaces, they are thresholds. To face yourself in a dream is a kind of test, not of ego, but of recognition. Can you meet your own gaze? Will the image return your movement in kind? Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes the reflection lags. Sometimes it smiles too quickly. Sometimes it blinks before you do. These are not nightmares. They are invitations. In this corridor, the first mirror shows you age 7, standing still in mismatched socks, mouth sticky from sugar. You reach out. The image touches the glass, half a second too late. A line from a forgotten poem drifts overhead. You left yourself here once, and the hallway kept it safe. You walk on. Mirror 2 reflects not your face, but your voice. It plays back a sentence you once said, except it's a little different. The same words, but gentler, softer than you remember. It says, it's okay if you didn't know. You stop. There is no one there. And yet, something in you exhales. Dreams often return us to versions of the self we've left behind. Not because we are haunted, but because we are layered. Every past self still echoes inside. The child who believed in magic, the teenager with the clenched jaw, the version of you who stayed too long, the one who left too soon, the self you might have been, had you turned left instead of right. In dreams, these selves have space. They do not need explanation, only airtime. Let's pause in a dream vignette now. A man finds himself in a kitchen, but everything is a mirror. Cupboards reflect endlessly. The refrigerator door hums with silver duplication. He opens a drawer. Inside, forks made of glass, each one bent differently. He looks up and sees not one reflection, but 10, each facing different directions. He sits. One of the reflections winks. He wakes laughing. No idea why. But something in him feels seen. Back in our corridor, the mirrors begin to blur. They ripple softly. You see not faces, but fragments. A hand, a shoulder in moonlight, the outline of someone turning away. These are memory echoes, not full dreams, just residues. The kind that cling behind your eyes at breakfast. The ones you chase mid-shower and lose mid-shampoo. The dreams you don't quite have, but carry anyway. Here, a mirror speaks, not aloud, not in language, but in warmth. You lean in, and it shows you a scene you forgot. Sitting on the floor, drawing on your jeans with a pen. There is no drama, no key insight, only softness. That memory shaped something. Dreams are not always about why. Sometimes they just hold what you thought you lost. In Inuit tradition, it's said that your soul can leave your body in sleep to visit others. And sometimes they visit you, not to scare, not to preach, but to gently hand you a version of yourself you haven't seen in a while. It's why sometimes you dream of hugging yourself, or scolding yourself, or forgiving yourself, because dream logic allows it. Waking logic might resist, but the dream opens its arms. Let me offer another mirror. This one tall, unsmudged. You see yourself in formal clothes you've never owned. Hair different, posture unfamiliar. This is a version of you that never happened. You reach for the glass. It doesn't reflect. It listens. You say, I wasn't ready then. The mirror nods. You move on. Dreams create spaces for conversation, not just with memory, but with self-concept. It's why so many dreamers report conferences of their own personality, a chorus of selves, debating, a courtroom of internal voices, a dressing room backstage, where the you from high school gives advice to the you from this morning. In dreams, this is not dissociation. This is dialogue, the self speaking in layers. Now we come to the last mirror, but it is blank. No image, just light. As you step closer, writing begins to appear. Not alphabet, not anything you know, but you read it anyway. The message? You are not just what you survived. You are also the questions you still dare to ask. Keep dreaming. You step away. Not because the message is done, but because it has landed. Somewhere in you, the meaning tucks into place. No analysis needed, just receipt. Let me tell you a final dream. A person is waiting at a train station made of mirrors. No train arrives. They sit. Every few minutes, a version of them walks past. Some wave, some glare, some cry without sound. Eventually, a child version of them approaches, hands them a compass made of paper, says we go north now. The dreamer wakes with the compass image burning behind the eyes. They buy a ticket, change something, say something. Later, they call it the train dream that rewired me. Dreams do that, quietly. You don't always realize where the mirror was, until you're already reflecting new light. Not all language is spoken. Some is drawn, etched, whispered with no sound. Some is felt before it forms. The language of dreams belongs to this softer lexicon, one made not of grammar, but gravity, not vocabulary, but vibration. You don't learn dream language like French or mathematics. You remember it, not as a student, but as a soul. Let's begin in an observatory, or maybe it's a library, or both. The walls are lined with scrolls, unfurled mid-air. Each one breathes like lungs. They pulse with slow light. Some bear symbols recognizable to your waking mind. Letters, runes, numbers. Others do not. They might be pictographs from a lost tongue, or something older, language your ancestors spoke before sound turned into sound waves. You run your finger across a line of soft ink. The page reacts. The word glows. And though you cannot read it, you know it means again. Linguists have long debated where language begins, how syllables form, how gesture becomes thought, how sound carries memory. But dream language lives elsewhere. It doesn't build meaning by stacking words. It pours it, like tea, hot, fragrant and imperfectly measured. Consider this. In dreams, you often remember what was said, but not exactly how. A stranger might explain your future using a series of color swatches. Your grandmother might speak in waves, the tide rising with each sentence. You understand them, utterly. But when you wake, the translation is gone. You remember the feeling of yes, but not the words. Because dream language has no subtitles, only echoes. Back in the observatory, there's a telescope pointed upward, but it doesn't show stars. It shows punctuation, marks arranged like constellations, a cluster of question marks blinking near Orion's belt, a semicolon orbiting a spiral-shaped ampersand. You listen, and somehow the sky speaks back. A single symbol slides down the glass. You nod. Sometimes dreams mean keep going. That's all. In ancient Mesopotamia, dreamers recorded sleep visions in cuneiform on damp clay. They wrote dream incantations, dream diagnoses, dream laments. A dream might be transcribed as, "The lion lay in the river, yet no water touched him." This was not metaphor. It was medicine. Prescribed, translated, responded to with ritual. Dreams were not personal. They were communal communication from the gods, not secrets to be hidden, but messages to be interpreted together. In medieval Japan, court women kept pillow books, soft diaries, scribbled with night symbols. One entry reads, "I dreamt of birds flying backward. The priest said it was grief disguised as prophecy. I think it was joy leaving by mistake." The interpretation didn't matter, only that the dream was honored, named, placed into the long vocabulary of being human. In this corridor, you find a small side room. It's filled with letters that never arrived, envelopes stamped with moons, pages written in dust. Some addressed, "To the version of me I almost became." Others, "Dear someone I saw once on a train in a dream but still wonder about." You pick up one, and instead of opening it, it opens you. You remember a sentence dreamt 3 years ago and never written down. There is still time to reroute the river. You didn't understand it then. You might not now, but your hands are shaking gently, because now you hear it in your own language. There are dreamers whose journals are not full of words but shapes. They draw spirals beside dates. They track their dreams using color. Red for alarm, blue for beauty, gold for recurrence. A single grey stroke for the dream that keeps returning, not identical, but rhyming. You know this dream. You've met it before, not in plot, but in tone. The hallway with flickering lights. The voice that asks no questions, but waits for your answer. The string you follow, not knowing where it begins. That string is a sentence, and the sentence does not end with a period, but a doorway. Now imagine a dictionary, not of definitions, but of resonances. You look up the word grief and find a picture of a frozen pear, the sound of a chair scraping floor, a hand letting go of another. Too late, there are no synonyms, only textures. Dreams remember texture more than syntax. They speak to your senses before your syllables, and that is their power. Let me share a dream excerpt from a Finnish composer. I was writing music on fabric. The ink sank, not visible, but audible. Each chord created a scent. Cinnamon, then coal, then honey. I knew this piece already. I just hadn't remembered it in daylight. He wrote the piece the next day. It made people cry. Was it from the dream, or simply through it? Dreams are not origins. They are apertures. They don't give us words. They remind us we already had them. Dream language often borrows from the sacred, scripture, mantra, chant, but it borrows rhythm more than reference. A woman dreams of a raven saying a single word, again, but not aloud. The feathers speak it. The wind carries it. She wakes and writes, "I don't know what to repeat, but I know I must." Sometimes the dream language doesn't translate to action, only to posture. You stand differently the next day, carry yourself with more mystery, or perhaps more kindness, or perhaps you listen more to sounds without origin. Let us now enter the hall of unwritten words. The walls are lined with inkwells, each glowing faintly. Floating in the center, a scroll, blank. You hold the quill, and in the dream, the ink does not write in symbols or letters, but in memory. You think of a laugh once shared. The page glows. You think of a silence that said more than any speech. The scroll folds itself. You are not writing. You are remembering aloud. In dream language, that's enough. A final story. A poet once dreamed of a child reciting a story backwards. Every word spilled in reverse, except for one, stay. She asked why that word came through clearly. The child only smiled. When she woke, she began writing poems without verbs, just images. She called them dream bleeds. She published them later, but the best line was never written. It stayed with her in the dream, because some dream language is not meant for sharing, only for knowing. Somewhere between midnight and maybe a train is waiting. Not the kind you board with a ticket and a tote. This one needs no luggage, no name, no platform announcement. The dream train arrives on schedule you never knew you agreed to. It doesn't pick you up, it finds you. In that moment just past sleep, just before surrender, when your mind unhooks from time and starts to listen differently. The first sound you hear is a chime, soft, weightless, and yet final, like a page turning itself. You are no longer in your bed. You are in motion. The dream train has many carriages. Each one holds a feeling, a memory, an intention. You step aboard the first. The floor is velvet, plum dark, and impossibly quiet. You walk down a narrow aisle. Seats stretch along each side, each occupied by a different version of you. One younger, staring out the window, another asleep, one reading a letter you never sent. They do not look up, but they know you've arrived. There is no conductor, but the train knows where to go. Or rather, you know where you need to go, and the train simply becomes the track. Dreams love trains. They are among the most common dream motifs worldwide. Symbols of movement, transition, of time passing or failing to pass, of destinations almost reached and just missed. In Germany, a study of over 22,000 dreams listed train as one of the top reported images, often accompanied by anxiety, missed stops, or mysterious passengers. But there is another kind of train dream, a softer one, where you're already aboard, where you're not running towards something but being carried by it, where your body stills and your mind finally allows itself to glide. This is that train. The second carriage hums with memory, not specific scenes, but textures, the smell of cinnamon, the sound of a birthday song slightly off key, the feeling of sitting in your father's coat at age 5, pretending it was a blanket fort. Here, the seats are empty, but if you sit, the scene plays anyway. A flickering screen, not in front of you, but around you. You're not watching a memory. You're feeling its atmosphere return. Not exactly joy, not exactly grief, more like recognition without language. You close your eyes. The train continues. Outside the window, nothing, or maybe everything. The landscape changes with your mood. A skyline of glowing letters, a mountain shaped like your grandmother's laugh, a field of chairs, each turned away from a table that isn't there. You do not question this. Not here. Dream logic applies. The world isn't odd. It's just symbolic. You glance down and realize the carpet now spells your name, one letter per step. You stop walking. The letters rearrange themselves to say, "You're still arriving." The next carriage is a lounge. Soft music plays. Not melody. Exactly. More like a rhythm your heartbeat remembers. A chalkboard on the far wall. displays a swirling diagram. You approach. At first it looks like a map, but soon you realize it's your dream logic, drawn in symbols. The elevator that never stopped, the party where no one knew your name, the recurring hallway with mirrors that blinked wrong. Each has been archived, not judged, just noted. The dream train keeps records. It doesn't need explanations, only trust. Let's pause here. Let me tell you a story. A woman dreams she's riding a train through dusk. Each station is named after a feeling: regret, anticipation, silence, relief. At each stop, someone boards carrying an object she once lost: a bracelet, a diary, a friend. No one speaks. When she reaches the final stop, the conductor hands her a small envelope. Inside, a spoon, bent slightly. A note reads, "This was never about arrival." She wakes holding her breath and remembers she'd stopped waiting for answers. Trains offer a unique feeling in dreams: containment without control. You can't steer. You can't jump off. But you're not panicking. You are somehow okay with where it's taking you. This speaks to something deeper: the acceptance, even momentary, that we do not need to know why a dream is happening in order for it to take us somewhere necessary. Dreams trust your instincts more than your logic, and the dream train is that trust made tangible. In the next carriage, you find other passengers, unfamiliar. Their faces are not quite faces, more like the suggestion of people. One resembles your fourth-grade teacher, another hums like your uncle. You realize these are not dream versions of real people. They're composites. The brain blends memories into efficiency. A smile from a stranger, a laugh you heard last week, a character from a book, all folded into one being. The dream does not care about biography, only resonance. You nod at them. They nod back. You feel comforted without knowing why. A cafe cart rolls by. There is no server, only options: regret with lemon, nostalgia steeped in lavender, the flavor of forgiveness still warm. You reach for something labeled unsent letter. It tastes of rain. You smile and don't ask why. Next comes the glass carriage. Transparent walls, floor, ceiling. You walk slowly. Here, you can see all your past dreams pass by. Some flicker briefly, that recurring dream of flooding, that floating moment of peace. Others play louder, the one where you told the truth too late, the one where the sky opened and said your name back to you. You do not stop them. You do not edit them. You only witness. This carriage is not for interpretation, only for honoring what came through. Did you know? In some indigenous belief systems, the act of dreaming is considered a form of travel, not just metaphorical, but literal. The soul walks, visits, gathers. The dream train echoes that idea. It is a vehicle for movement without motion, a bridge between who you were and who you are learning to be. Each night, it picks you up from the station of sleep and returns you somewhere a little different, not always forward, but always onward. You sit now in the final car. This one is different, circular. At the center, a fire, not dangerous, just warm. Around it, chairs, some empty, some filled with people you've never met, but who feel like poems you forgot how to read. One of them speaks: "We do not interpret the train. We ride it. We share our view. That is enough." The flame flickers, and you realize this journey has no map, only momentum, only soft arrival. As the train begins to slow, you feel a vibration behind the ribs. Not panic, not urgency, something simpler. Returning. You will wake soon. The dream will fade, but the hum will linger. That awareness that your night was carried, that something took the chaos and turned it into motion, even if just for a few minutes, even if it left no trace. Before you step off, one last figure hands you a card. It has no words, only an eye, a spiral, a key. You place it in your pocket. It dissolves, but you still feel it, just beneath the skin. A weightless direction. You didn't know you were walking into a museum, not until you heard the hush. Not the kind of hush found in libraries or cathedrals, but the specific silence of rooms filled with objects that remember more than people do. This is the Museum of Dream Motifs, the archive of symbols that spill across sleep, again and again, in different hands, different languages, in minds that will never meet. You are not here to interpret. You are here to witness. The museum doesn't have a floor plan. It unfolds organically. Rooms arranged by emotional temperature rather than logic. Hallways that bend inward. Displays that follow you with a gentle hum, waiting to be noticed. In the first chamber, you find a glass case labeled "The Teeth." Inside, rows of pearlescent molars. Some crumble into chalk. Others are whole but melting. A few whisper phrases you can't hear unless you lean very, very close. Teeth are among the most reported dream motifs worldwide. They fall out, crack, multiply, shrink, speak. They are rarely the focus of the dream, but they often steal the scene. Why? Perhaps because teeth are truth. Visible, intimate, strangely durable. To lose them is to feel exposed. To gain them again is to become feral. You step back. The hum continues. Next case, the unread book. Thousands of volumes, no titles, no page numbers, but each seems to belong to you. Some feel like they contain the dream you had at age 12 that you still can't forget. Others hum with languages no one has spoken in centuries. One book is open. The page reads, "You forgot the question. The answer is waiting." You don't turn the page. You move on. Here comes the spoon courtroom. Yes, really. A diorama, carefully lit. A courtroom made entirely of cutlery. A bent spoon stands accused. The jury, 12 tarnished forks. The judge, a soup ladle in powdered wig. It seems absurd. And yet, you've had this dream. Not this exactly, but the feeling. Being judged for something you don't understand. Being on trial inside someone else's metaphor. Dreams love humor, but even the ridiculous has teeth. The hallway shifts. Walls breathe faintly. You enter the room of missing pants. On display, mannequins in office attire. Jacket, shirt, tie, no trousers. No embarrassment, just exposure. There's no plaque, but someone has left a note on the wall. Sometimes I dream I'm at work with no pants, but nobody notices. I think I want someone to notice. The room is quiet. You nod, not in pity, in solidarity. Let's continue. The next chamber feels colder. It's called the maze with no exit. Models in miniature, each maze unique, some circular, some sharp, all with one floor, no way out. A recurring dream for many, being trapped, chased, running endlessly. Some researchers link it to anxiety, the brain mirroring emotional loops. Others say it's the lack of resolution, an unfinished story, a fear not yet named. But here, under glass, the mazes don't feel terrifying, just tired. They seem to say, "We're not meant to trap you, we're waiting for your wings." Across the hallway, another gallery, this one lit in soft golden tones. Welcome to the floating room motif. Pillows drift, lamps sway as if underwater. The air seems buoyant. This is the flight dream, the exhale after tension, the moment of choice, unburdened. Across cultures, flight appears in sleep, rising above city rooftops, drifting down stairwells, launching skyward without effort. Often, flight isn't escape, it's recognition. A yes, the body never felt safe enough to try. Look now at the wrong train dream, a platform with no signs, passengers with blurred faces. Every clock reads a different hour. You get on, but something's off. You're not going where you meant to go. This is the dream of misdirection, of anxiety layered with longing. Often arrives when you doubt your direction in life, when a small voice wonders, is this where I meant to go? Not to alarm you, just to ask. You don't need to answer right now. The dream already knows. Let's step through the hall of rooms within rooms. A miniature dollhouse. You open the front. Inside, another dollhouse. Inside that, another, each version slightly different. This motif appears in dreams during identity shifts. Moving homes, changing names, becoming. You wonder who you are, and the dream shows you all your previous shells, nested, still intact. Now we pause at the Dream Cafe exhibit, a table with tiny figures sipping from cups labeled closure. Almost, not yet. Menus list dishes like the sandwich you ate in a memory that wasn't yours, soup of apologies served to the wrong person. You laugh. So do the statues. This motif speaks to yearning, to the communal quality of longing. So much happens around tables, even in sleep. In the final gallery, you find a wall of spoons. Yes, again. Some glisten with meaning. Others sag with memory. A plaque reads, "The spoon symbolizes small tenderness, daily effort, nourishment." It appears again and again because you carry more than anyone sees. There is no correct motif, only frequent guests. Some are universal, others known only to you, but the museum honors them equally, as expressions, as fingerprints, as the language your deepest self uses when language fails. One final room. It is empty, no displays, just a single bench. You sit, the walls are paper. Written across them, dream quotes, scribbled by visitors past. My dream kept asking if I had called my sister. I was a house. Each room held a memory someone else left behind. He said, "Try forgiveness in lowercase." I opened a drawer and found myself, still folded. I knocked on my own spine and something answered. You smile. These are not puzzles. These are poems the brain sends to itself in code. You don't need to understand them. You only need to let them echo. There is a moment just before waking, not the jolt of alarm clocks or morning light. Earlier than that, quieter, a hinge between realms. You're still dreaming, or perhaps drifting just outside of dream, but something begins to loosen. The symbols that held shape begin to blur. The storyline recedes like tidwater, and the self, still here, still breathing, but changed. This is the fade, the slow return, the gentle dissolve of all that was just so vivid, so true, so filled with feeling you were sure it would last forever. But it doesn't. It never does. And that too is holy. You return to the corridor one final time. Fewer doors now, fewer lights. Some monitors flicker but do not speak. You pass familiar rooms, the mirror, the spoon courtroom, the cafe of unspoken wants. Each nods as you go, no words, just acknowledgement. You are not a visitor now. You are part of this place. Perhaps you always were. The first room of the fade is the chamber of residue. Here, floating above soft air, drift the scraps of forgotten dreams. A left shoe worn by someone named Grief, a calendar page with no month, a teacup filled with yesterday's promise. They do not demand explanation. They only ask for rest. Dreams that were never remembered still leave a trace. In the decisions you make without knowing why. In the person you forgive without realizing what softened you. They pass through you. Gentler than weather, stronger than language. The second room, the sleep lab at dawn. No cables now. No buzzing. Just stillness. A final dreamer rests on a low cot. Eyes twitching once beneath lids. Then again, a projection floats above the bed. A glowing jellyfish-like brain silhouette. Each pulse a memory softening, a symbol being unpacked. A phrase dissolving back into something simpler than syntax. One researcher watches. They do not take notes. They simply close the notebook and place it on the pillow beside the sleeper. Some dreams end abruptly. You fall. You wake. You shout. Others fade. Like breath into fog, they withdraw quietly. Not gone, not lost, just no longer performing. Their curtain call is silent, but their effect still echoing. Let's wander into the pillow archive. Here, the walls are made of old linens, stitched with symbols, initials, and shapes only the sleeping recall. Each pillow holds a single message. When you press your ear to one, you hear, "Say it slower next time." Another, the answer isn't louder, it's closer. You press a final one and hear only a heartbeat. Not yours, someone else's, but it calms you. Dreams are not interested in resolution. They are interested in movement, transformation. Even if the change is invisible to the waking eye, you fall asleep with one story. You wake, slightly bent toward another. You may not notice, but others will. In the way you pause before interrupting. In the moment you let the silence land, instead of filling it. The dream worked, even if you forgot every frame. One final gallery, lit by starlight, not bulbs. Here, the constellations drift more slowly. You see, the dream time, not a time in sequence, but a time that always is. Figures walk across the sky, ancestors, unborn ones, selves not yet manifested. They wave. You wave back. No confusion. Only, of course you're here. Dreams never operate in linear time. They loop. They echo. And at the edge of waking, they braid. This is how you remember something you've never learned. This is how you recognize someone you've never met. Let's sit now. In the final room, a soft space. Not a museum, not a lab, not a temple. Just a place. A clipboard rests on a cushion. The page reads, "Here ends the journey." Unless the line trails off. You smile. The dream corridor knows you. It knows you'll be back. Maybe tonight. Maybe not for weeks. But the path is always waiting. Let me share one last dream fragment. A woman dreams. She walks into a library. She finds her name on a book spine, pulls it out. Inside, only one sentence. "You were always more than what happened to you." She wakes, remembers nothing but a sense of rightness. Something in her aligns. She begins journaling again. Not dreams, just the day. But it's enough. Dreaming never demanded belief, only attention, only noticing. As you begin to wake, you hear one sound, not the chime of beginning, the tone of return. It's quiet, but clear. It says, "Rest well, dreamer." The next story is almost ready. There are no more doors, no more filing cabinets, no more symbols asking to be read, or dreams waiting in line to perform. You are beyond the corridor now. And what's left is returning. But not a return to noise, or pace, or checklists. This return is a spiral, soft and patient, folding the dream back into the folds of your ribs, like a letter you almost forgot to reread. You are not quite awake, not yet. You're in that in-between space, the limon, a threshold with no nameplate. It feels like sinking, or rising, or both. Time has lost interest in keeping track. So has thought. And all that's left is remembering differently. Because here's the thing. No one tells you about dreams. You don't wake up from them. You wake up with them. They come with you. In your wrists. Behind your eyes. In the sudden urge to text someone without knowing why. In the softness of your tone when you speak next. In the pause between inhale and answer. Dreams aren't left behind on the pillow. They fuse, and you become part dream too. Let's walk slowly now, not toward anything, just with. There's no narrator in this part, no script, only you and the language you carry. It doesn't need to be said aloud, but if it were, it might sound something like this. I remember not the dream, but the feeling that it wanted to stay. Something showed me the shape of forgiveness, and it wasn't anything I expected. I thought I would lose myself in sleep, but somehow I found a note I left for me. In this post-dream space, memory gets creative. It blends, real with imagined, recalled with rewritten. It stitches together last night's conversation with a hallway from your first apartment and calls it a premonition. It layers music over silence, until the silence starts to sound like comfort. Dreams are not static. They metabolize, and over time, you forget what was dream and what was design. It doesn't matter. You are different now anyway. Let me show you a final image. No walls, no stages, just a hill at dusk. You're sitting on it, barefoot, watching the wind pull small lanterns across the sky like curious stars. Beside you, a journal, but it's still blank. And for the first time, that feels okay. Not because you have nothing to say, but because not everything must be written. Some dreams ask only to be witnessed, to drift through you like weather, shaping the landscape without leaving bruises. And if you listen closely, you realize you're humming a melody you've never heard before, except maybe you have. In that dream about the train, or was it the one with the spoon? Or maybe. Either way, it's yours. There is a phrase etched in the sky now. Thank you for remembering. You don't know who it's from. And it doesn't ask to be known, just read. Read softly, as a blessing. You stand. No one tells you to, but your body knows. The dream has ended, but not its movement. Somewhere, a kettle whistles. A bird begins to speak in the language of next steps. And you take one, not hurriedly, like fog rolling off a lake. Let's breathe here for a while. And in this space, we offer thanks to the dreams that came gently and the ones that refused to stay quiet, to the fears that dressed up like monsters just to be heard, to the memories that blurred into metaphor, to the selves we met again, older, younger, imagined, to the symbols that will never be solved, but still felt like gospel, to the parts of us that waited, yearned, whispered, until finally we made room. You may forget some of this. That's allowed. In fact, that's expected, but forgetting isn't failure. Dreams don't care if you recall them, word for word. They care that you were present, that you opened the door when they knocked, that you listened, even if only for a moment. That's enough. It always was. In the stillness now, the scenery changes. Your bed, not yet visible, becomes more real. Your breath returns to waking rhythm. A coffee cup somewhere is waiting. A screen waits to light up. A task wonders if you still remember its urgency. And you do. But something has shifted. You are no longer rushing to respond. You move differently, not slower, more deliberately. Because part of you knows the world doesn't disappear when you sleep. It waits. And sometimes, if you're lucky, it becomes even more legible. You are still walking, but no longer in corridors. Now it's a memory, or a song, or the path to your pillow. But whatever the shape, the texture remains. Soft, curious, unspoken, true. There's a table now. You sit, and across from you, no reflection, no teacher, just a chair, empty, or perhaps not. Perhaps that chair holds the next question you'll learn to ask, the next voice you'll hear when the dream begins again. Perhaps you don't need to know, not right now. In some cultures, dreams are offerings, sent to the world of waking like folded letters placed into fire, not to destroy, but to deliver. Smoke carries the meaning upward. Ashes speak to the soil. You don't write your dreams down tonight. You breathe them into the air. You light a candle. You hum. You make tea, even if you don't drink it. You mark the moment, because you dreamed, and you returned. And that in itself is worthy. So here's the last thing I'll say. Not every journey ends with insight. Not every dream arrives with purpose. But you made room. You made time. You let absurdity flirt with metaphor. You let memory dance with hope. And something in you said, yes, show me. Even if only for 90 minutes. Even if only for the length of a voice. That's a gift you gave yourself. And it will echo further than you know.